Let me ask you something. What if the reason you're exhausted isn't because you're weak? What if you're just too reachable? Too reachable for people who don't respect your time. Too reachable for crises that aren't yours. Too reachable for a world that consumes you but never truly sees you. Let me ask you, when was the last time you were truly alone, without guilt, without noise, without feeling like you had to explain yourself? We live in a world that's wired for urgency, yet starved for meaning. A culture that confuses accessibility with value, as if your worth is measured by how fast you reply, how much you give, how available you are to everyone else but yourself. You wake up to messages. You scroll through chaos. You respond. You perform. You adjust. You accommodate. And somewhere in that endless loop of digital reaction, you disappear. And here is the most dangerous part. You start to believe that disappearing is normal. Carl Jung called this the loss of the self. When you become a reflection of others' needs, a product of external demands, a shell of your original essence. The more one becomes identical with others, the more one's own individuality is suppressed. You think you're being helpful. You think you're being kind. But let me hit you with the truth Jung would have told you. You're betraying your soul. Every time you say yes when your body screams no, every time you respond out of obligation instead of alignment, every time you silence your need for solitude to avoid disappointing someone else, you're not just burning time, you're burning yourself. You've been conditioned to feel guilty for needing space. You've been taught that solitude is selfish, that boundaries are rude, that being unavailable makes you cold, difficult, or uncaring. But here is the disruption. Constant availability is not compassion, it is self-erasure. Your energy is not infinite. Your soul is not a subscription service. And Carl Jung knew, without solitude, the self cannot survive. Without time to turn inward, you will become lost in the noise of others. You will become reactive, not reflective, drained, not directed, present everywhere, but absent within. This video is not just about setting boundaries. It is about reclaiming psychic sovereignty, about remembering that your presence is sacred, and it must be earned, not expected. So if you've ever felt tired for no reason, overwhelmed but unable to disconnect, loved yet invisible, this message is your wake-up call. Stop being constantly available. Start becoming deeply you, because the most dangerous thing you can lose in this world is yourself. Welcome to Psychoria. Let's begin. Have you ever wondered why you're so drained, even when nothing dramatic is happening? Why your mind feels foggy, your emotions scattered, and your days filled with obligations that don't even feel like your own? Why you're surrounded by people, yet feel invisible to yourself? This video will confront the hidden parasite feeding on your energy, constant availability, and reveal why Carl Jung believed it is not a virtue, but a slow form of spiritual self-destruction. In this cinematic deep dive, you will discover why being endlessly reachable fragments your identity, how Jung's concept of individuation demands solitude, and why without it, your soul will suffocate. The psychological cost of being nice at the expense of your authenticity. How to reclaim your time, your energy, and your inner boundaries without shame, apology, or fear. And how to build a life that is not reactive to others, but rooted in the truth of who you really are. This is not a productivity hack. This is a reckoning with yourself. And by the end of this video, you will not just understand why you feel this way. You'll know exactly what to do to stop the leakage, fortify your boundaries, and begin reclaiming your soul from a world that's been silently consuming it. You're not tired because you're lazy. You're tired because you're leaking. Leaking energy, leaking time, leaking yourself into people, platforms, conversations, and commitments that never deserve that access in the first place. You think you're being reliable. You think you're being a good friend, partner, teammate, human. But let's get painfully honest. You've become a borderless being, available on demand, responding out of guilt, living on the edge of burnout while smiling like everything is fine. You don't rest. You delay collapse. You don't breathe. You suffocate silently. You don't live your life. You manage other people's expectations of it. And here is the disturbing part. You've been trained to feel ashamed for needing time alone, to apologize for going offline, to feel selfish for protecting your peace. You've internalized the lie that availability is love, that silence is abandonment, that solitude is weakness. Carl Jung saw this long before it became a digital epidemic. He warned of the danger of living outwardly, of orienting your identity around what others demand instead of what your soul requires. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And that is the trap. You stay busy to avoid the quiet. You stay reachable to avoid the guilt. You stay helpful so you don't feel useless. And without realizing it, you abandon yourself every single day. You become a mirror for others, but invisible to yourself. You lose your edge. You lose your mystery. You lose the center of gravity that makes you you. This is not just psychological exhaustion. This is existential erosion. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you push down your discomfort to preserve someone else's comfort, every time you trade solitude for approval, you're not being kind, you're disappearing. And the world is perfectly designed to keep you in that loop. Notifications, emergencies, expectations disguised as opportunities. Everyone wants a piece of you, until you are the only one with nothing left. That is not connection. That is consumption. That is not love. That is leakage of the soul. Jung's work was not about escaping others. It was about becoming whole within yourself. And you cannot become whole if your identity is constantly fractured by the demands of the outside world. This video is a confrontation, a disruption, a mirror. It is going to expose what you have been too tired, too nice, or too distracted to name. That being constantly available might be the very thing that is killing your clarity, your power, and your chance to ever feel truly alive. We've been lied to, not just misled, programmed, taught to believe that availability is virtue, that saying yes is goodness, that being reachable, teachable, agreeable at all times is some kind of spiritual badge. But Carl Jung saw the devastation beneath this performance. He saw that what we call connection is often just possession, your soul being devoured by everyone else's expectations. That what we call love is often just self-abandonment with a smile. You've been taught that if you withdraw, you're cold. If you say no, you're cruel. If you don't respond immediately, you're inconsiderate. That presence means performance, and love means availability. But Jung shattered that illusion with one razor-sharp truth. To find your soul, you must first stop being accessible to everything that is not you. This is not philosophy. It is survival. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But here is the part they never tell you. You will never become that person if your attention belongs to everyone but yourself. You will never touch the root of your being if you are always bracing for the next ping, the next favor, the next demand that hijacks your energy and your identity. And you will never hear your own inner voice if you are always performing for the crowd. This is the soul's great tragedy. Not that it is lost, but that it is leased out in pieces, until there is nothing left to come home to. Jung called the path inward individuation, not as a luxury, not as a spiritual hobby, but as a sacred and dangerous necessity. The man who looks outside dreams. The man who looks inside awakens. And awakening is not peaceful. It is war. It is a rebellion against everything in you that was trained to please, to placate, to survive by being what others needed, even if it killed your truth in the process. This is not about being introverted. It is not about becoming a recluse. It is about reclaiming your psychological sovereignty. Because the second you are always available, you become a servant to the collective. Your boundaries dissolve. Your compass shatters. You start mistaking being liked for being real. And the price? You become scattered, disoriented, numb. Your soul becomes a foreign country you don't remember how to enter. And silence, true silence, becomes terrifying. Because in that stillness, you can no longer hide. You can't mask your wounds with busyness. You can't distract yourself with other people's crises. You can't pretend you don't feel hollow, overstimulated, and utterly disconnected from your own depth. But Jung whispers something few have the courage to hear. In that terrifying silence is the threshold, the place where the masks fall, where the roles rot, where the real you is forged in fire. Your creativity is there. Your clarity is there. Your strength, your strangeness, your soul, they are all waiting in the quiet you have been taught to fear. This is where resurrection begins. Because here is the brutal, life-altering truth. You cannot individuate while constantly accommodating. You cannot evolve while being endlessly reactive. You cannot awaken while staying plugged into a system that feeds on your distraction and profits from your depletion. If you want to live a life of depth, you must become unavailable to anything that demands your betrayal in exchange for belonging. This is not selfishness. This is spiritual defiance. This is saying no, not out of rejection, but out of resurrection. This is realizing that solitude is not absence, it is amplification. It does not empty you, it reveals you. And once you taste that, once you feel the raw, undiluted power of your own inner presence, you will never give it away cheaply again. This is not easy. Individuation is not a gentle ascent. It is a descent into the underworld of your own psyche. Jung did not ask you to be liked. He asked you to be whole. And to be whole, you must do the most rebellious, terrifying, liberating thing you can possibly do in this overconnected, overstimulated, over-obligated world. You must become unavailable so you can finally become unshakably you. We are drowning in connection, wired in, tuned out, overstimulated, undersold. Every moment is a performance. Every silence is suspicious. Every boundary feels like betrayal. We live in a culture that weaponizes your conscience and monetizes your exhaustion. You're expected to be available at all times, responsive within minutes, emotionally accessible at all hours, and somehow still balanced. But the real cost is yourself. Carl Jung's warning was not just philosophical, it was prophetic. He saw what happens when a person becomes consumed by the collective. They lose their edges, their essence, their orientation. They become what everyone else needs, except who they truly are. And that is exactly the crisis of our time. A man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. But who has time to pass through anything now? We do not descend, we scroll. We do not face our shadows, we perform around them. We do not withdraw to renew, we numb to survive. We wear our burnout like a badge. We confuse stimulation for meaning, and we treat solitude like a sickness. But here is the raw truth. In this era, solitude is a rebellion. Silence is an act of war against a world trying to colonize your mind. And setting boundaries is not just self-care. It is spiritual survival. You're not just tired from work. You're tired from being too many people for too many people. You're tired because you wake up in a panic to respond before you are even awake. You perform happiness while silently unraveling. You keep showing up for others while ghosting yourself. This is not life. This is psychological fragmentation. And every app, every platform, every social contract is designed to keep you fragmented and reactive. Because a distracted soul is a manageable soul. A quiet mind does not spend. A boundary setter does not conform. A centered human is a dangerous human because they are no longer easy to manipulate. This is why Jung's truth hits like fire right now. The more connected the world becomes, the more disconnected you must be to remember who you are. Solitude is not trendy. Boundaries are not popular. Silence is not profitable. But they are necessary. Urgently, violently necessary. If you want to be anything more than a mirror of the world around you, we are raising generations who may never know themselves, who are being trained to believe their value lies in constant access. And unless we disrupt this, consciously, daily, courageously, we will lose the ability to go inward entirely. Jung's message was never more vital than it is now. If you do not claim your inner world, the outer world will devour it. Understanding Jung's message is powerful. Living it is transformational. You do not need to vanish into the mountains to protect your soul. You need to learn how to draw the line, clearly, daily, unapologetically, between what serves yourself and what sabotages it. Here is how to start building that line, step by step. 1. Create one sacred hour each day. Before the world touches you, touch your soul first. Wake up and give the first 60 minutes to you. No phone, no inbox, no noise. Read something meaningful. Write what you feel. Sit in silence. Think your own thoughts. If you do not own your morning, the world will own your mind. This is not luxury. It is spiritual CPR. 2. Delay your response. Reclaim your rhythm. You do not owe anyone instant access to your nervous system. Start practicing a simple rule. Do not reply immediately. Breathe first. Let people wait. Let your mind respond, not just react. You are not cold. You are conscious. This pause is where your power lives. 3. Say no without explaining yourself. You do not need a tragic backstory to justify protecting your energy. If it is a no, it is a no. No is a complete sentence, and a sacred one. Boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and still love myself. Practice saying it calmly, directly, and without guilt. The first few times will feel like fire, but that fire, that is you coming back to life. 4. Make solitude a daily ritual, not a retreat, not a weekend getaway, a daily requirement. Even just 10 minutes of uninterrupted stillness, no screen, no music, no talking, rebuilds your psychic walls. Use this space to reflect on what you actually feel. Ask yourself what you have been avoiding. Remember what matters when no one else is watching. Solitude is not empty. It is full of truth. 5. Audit your accessibility. Look at your life. Who and what has unfiltered access to you? Ask, do I actually want to be in this group chat? Why am I still answering calls I dread? Which notifications are stealing my attention without earning it? Remove, mute, block, unsubscribe. Reclaim your inner bandwidth like your peace depends on it, because it does. 6. Build a ritual of return. Each evening, before bed, ask yourself, where did I abandon myself today? And then, where did I choose myself today? This is not about perfection. It is about awareness, small shifts, daily courage, inner rebuilding. This is not self-help fluff. It is psychological survival in a world that wants your attention more than your authenticity. You do not need more time. You need fewer leaks. You don't need to escape the world. You need to stop letting it invade you. The boundary begins now. You came here exhausted, perhaps not in body, but in soul. Tired of offering your life in pieces to everyone but yourself. Tired of being constantly reachable, endlessly available, always open, even when what you really needed was to close. But now you have seen what Jung saw, what most never dare to admit, that the soul does not thrive in exposure. It cannot breathe under fluorescent lights. It cannot grow in the noise. We've mistaken accessibility for love, exhaustion for virtue, and self-abandonment for compassion. We were taught to be good by disappearing, to be kind by becoming hollow, to be successful by staying plugged in, even as we fall apart. But this has never been the way. Carl Jung, with eyes that peered into the darkest chambers of the psyche, knew something that still terrifies us. That becoming whole requires rupture. That healing demands sacred separation. That the self only arrives when everything false is stripped away. So this is not a call to isolation, but to integration. Not to hide, but to re-emerge undistorted. Not to vanish from the world, but to stop vanishing from yourself. Because constant visibility is not presence. It is performance. It is sacrifice dressed up as service. And every time you betray your inner life to be liked, chosen, needed, you abandon the one relationship that defines every other, the one you have with your own soul. Jung taught that the self, the deepest, truest you, is not found in obedience, but in inner alignment. And alignment takes silence. It takes withdrawal, not as an escape, but as a sacred act of remembrance. To pull back is not to be cold. It is to be whole. To be unreachable is not to be cruel. It is to be unshakably real. And to say no, firmly, clearly, unapologetically, is to say yes to a life not built on burnout, but on inner truth. So the invitation is not simply to rest. It is to revolt, not with rage, but with reverence. Not by burning bridges, but by building thresholds where only the worthy may enter. Let your solitude become your sanctuary. Let your absence become your offering. Let your boundaries become your biography. Because in a world that confuses visibility with value, your refusal to perform becomes a revolution. And in a culture addicted to noise, the quiet soul does not disappear. It becomes undeniable. So take yourself back, not as an act of selfishness, but as an act of sacred preservation. Because the world does not need more of you. It needs the real you. The one who rises not from obligation, but from overflow. The one who shows up only when it is true. The one who knows. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to become whole. And that becoming begins in silence. If something deep stirred within you, do not silence it. That tremble in your chest, that is the soul remembering itself. Subscribe to Psycoria, not for more noise, but for the rare silence that awakens. Here, we do not chase content. We pursue consciousness. Tap the bell to follow this unfolding journey into Jung, solitude, shadow, and the self you were meant to become. And tell me below, what line must you draw now, if you are to remain whole? Because this is not entertainment. It is rebellion. It is resurrection. It is the art of remembering who you are, before the world told you to forget. Until next time, stay fierce, stay awake, stay true.